Hello, everybody, and welcome to Fak'ugesi Online 2020 Power to the Pixel. My name is Natalie Baneng, and I'm the Fak'ugesi Online host. And I'm really sad because it's the last week. But it's been a really lovely month, and I've learned a lot. And I'm sure if you've been with us, you've learned a lot too. And you've been part of all the necessary conversations. And today we have yet another live stream panel. And the topic of our panel today is African game publishers and mobilizing African games. And this panel is part of the extended programming of the exhibition People of Play, African Game Developers, curated by Vic Bassey. The notion of a truly African publisher felt like a pipe dream 5 years ago. However, the definition of a publisher becoming a lot more fluid and the emergence of new actors within the game space, a discussion on what constitutes a publisher is warranted. Furthermore, what avenues currently exist to make the monetization of content in gaming space easier and possible for the creators. So that's kind of what we're going to be talking about tonight, and thank you for joining us. Chairing this panel will be Vic Bassey from Games Industry Africa, and I'm going to quickly read Vic Bassey's bio. Vic Bassey is the curator and content lead of People of Play, Game African Developers for Fak'ugesi Arcade 2020. Bassey is a regular fixture of the European and African games industries and currently works as a business development strategist at a global publisher, Raw Fury. Vic is a mentor to a number of indie studios and has previously covered the games industry in Sweden as a contributor for Game Reactor, Pocket Gamer, MCV Nordic, as well as video game reviews for Press to Play. He is a contributor at Games Industry Biz and currently the founder and editor of Games Industry Africa. So that is our panel chair, and on our panel we have Douglas Ogeto from Ludique Works in Kenya. From Carry First in South Africa, we have Lucy Hoffman, who is standing in for Sean Gotkin, but Sean unfortunately wasn't feeling well. But we got the second best thing, or I mean, it's a woman, so I mean, even more fun to hear what her insights are. We have Dawit Abraham from Qene Technologies or Games, and Kgositsile Poonyane from MTN Gaming. So welcome everybody. I'm going to hand over to Vic, our chair. Hello Vic, how are you?
Hi, Natalie. Thanks for that fantastic introduction to today's panel discussion. And to everyone who is, tuning into this. This is, unfortunately, as Natalie said, the culmination of this year's People of Play exhibition and a series of events. But today's is a big one. Today we will be talking about the publisher landscape, and it's an honor to be joined in this panel discussion by a really stellar cast of speakers. Introducing first from MTN, we have Kgositsile, who will introduce himself briefly.
Good evening, everyone. I'm quite excited to be a part of this. My name is Kgositsile Poonyane. I look after gaming as an area of business for MTN. I look after gaming throughout the MTN group, so I work with the rest of the markets within the African continent and also into the Middle East. And really my participation here is, as MTN, we've began a journey of wanting to participate actively in the gaming space. And in the past year, we've spent quite a bit of time understanding the ecosystem, interacting with various players, and really figuring out the best way to participate. Hence my presence in this conversation.
Thank you very much for that introduction. Moving swiftly along to Douglas Ogeto from Ludique Works.
Thanks a lot, Vic. Thanks for it's a pleasure to be here. My name is Douglas Ogeto, co-founder at Ludique Works. We are Africa's favorite and leading video game publishing company. looking to support any game developer who's out there with a mobile, PC, or console game. We are happy to say that we are supporting game developers with the marketing, distribution, and monetization of their games. Yeah, pleasure to be here and looking forward to the discussions.
Thank you so much, Douglas. Next up, we have Lucy Hoffman, who is standing in for Sean Godkin.
Hi, everyone. I am Lucy. I'm one of the co-founders of Carry First. I would say we're newbies on the block. We founded the company 2 years ago with the mission to connect international game studios to customers on the continent. So helping them market and distribute and monetize users across the African region, and then also work with local developers to help them scale their content globally. So really excited to be on this panel with a few new folks who I haven't met before, a few ones I've met along the way at other digital conferences this year, and a partner of mine, Dawit from Qene Games. So yeah, it's great to be here.
Wonderful. And last but not least, we have David Abraham from Qene Games.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dawit Abraham. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Qene Games. I've been also a game developer for the past 3.5-4 years. We have been, launching our self-published games until now, until we found a really good publisher. We have, I would say, quite a good experience building games. So I would be talking about that a lot in the development part of it, and hopefully we have a really good session.
Fantastic. So that is your panel for this evening's conversation. And I thought, let's kick things off with something that has a very fluid definition, or at least has become more of a fluid definition in recent years: the name and the description of what a publisher is. What is a publisher, especially in an African context? It'd be great to learn and better understand what that means to each and every single person on this panel. So why don't we start with Lucy, and then moving on to Douglas, and then Dawit as from the developer side. Yeah.
Cool. I get this question a lot, not just from folks in the gaming industry, but my parents and other people in my life who are like, what is a mobile games publisher? And I think the way that the analogy that I've typically used, which people kind of understand as thinking about like books publishing, right? The concept of publishing is not unique to games. So what do books publishers do? Well, one, they find authors who've created a great book already. And then they help them finish it, right? They give them advice on what might need to be changed to make the book better. And then they figure out the channels that they're going to distribute the book. Maybe it's going to be on Amazon. Maybe you're going to find local bookstores that have really loyal followings. And then they figure out things like, what's the pricing of the book? What's the best way to position it in the market? What should be the cover of the book so people actually buy it on the shelf? And I think a mobile games publisher does exactly that, but with mobile games. So when we work with our developer partners, we help them think about, what features could we introduce to really help the game realize its full potential? How do we make sure that there's a strong monetization system in place so that even if it's free to download, that eventually, we're going to be able to make money from this piece of IP? What are the right channels to distribute? Of course, there's like Google Play and the App Store, but especially on the African continent, there are so many other ways that customers are discovering content, whether it's through alternative app stores or through their favorite telcos. And so, there's a lot of thinking around distribution, and then finally, how do users pay for it? And I think publishers more and more, not just on the continent, but globally, are starting to think of, going beyond those traditional services and thinking about what other value adds can they have. Sometimes it's technology. Sometimes they've built a unique proprietary marketing platform or software that developers can integrate, and they can learn all sorts of things and leverage that to explore new audiences. In our case, we know that one of the biggest constraints for users on the continent is payments, is the ability to pay for content. They don't have access to local credit cards. International credit cards that Google or Apple sort of use. So a big part of our focus is actually thinking about how we solve for the challenge around payments and make sure that all of the developer partners that we're working with are able to sort of monetize users on the continent, but importantly that customers here are able to participate in the way that they desire. So I do think, I think there are aspects of being a publisher that are sort of really intuitive and we understand. And I think more and more we're finding that publishers have to have a little secret sauce for them to be truly useful to their partners. I'll step out my soapbox for a moment if other people want to join.
Vic, you're muted.
Sorry.
But...
You're muted.
Yeah, Douglas, how
Okay.
would you describe a publisher?
I guess I'd probably say everything that Lucy said, but well, in addition to that, I'd probably say a publisher sees how to take what the game developer has done and see how to actually present it to the final consumer, who's the player, in a way that that they understand and would love to partake the content in whichever format that will be, whether video, the game itself, or and being a game in whatever format, mobile, PC, or console. So I'd say a publisher just thinks about the game as well as the go-to-market strategy. How do we actually get this game out to market? So yeah, pretty much painting the house. The developer has basically built a house, but how do you add the windows, curtains, and everything else? Yeah.
Excellent. Which brings me, before we get the developer take on things, it would be great to hear MTN's take on publisher. How critical is a publisher, or even relevant is a publisher to what you do at MTN Kgositsile?
So I think, this is an interesting one because it kind of leads on to parts of other conversations where, for us, for the longest of time, we've always come in at the end of what the guys have been speaking about. We see ourselves as a helping hand, probably at the end of once the house is built, the curtains are on, all of that, and really our relationship has been a little bit further with what they call aggregators, which is kind of one step further after the publishers. So the guys who then get the stuff from the publishers and put it together. And we've always somehow, by perception, thought that the aggregators are the publishers, and have learned to understand that there's more to it than the guys that we interact with, the guys that bring the finished product. There's all the work that happens behind it. So, in a nutshell, we see ourselves as kind of a helping hand to the publishers and also the aggregators to bring whatever has been agreed to with the developers closer to the market.
And arguably the most important person in that relationship is the developer. Dawit, you are now signed and working closely with, amongst others, Lucy at Carry First. What were you looking for as a developer when seeking a publisher?
All right. So basically the biggest mistake that we've learned over the past 3-4 years of building stuff is building and selling are entirely different things. You can build whatever you want, and it could be great or whatever you wanted it to be, but it doesn't mean that you can sell it. And this is true, not just in books, but anything, right? You make a movie, but you have to sell it. You write a book, you have to sell it. And the biggest problem we've had, we launched a game 2018, Kukulu. It was critically acclaimed. We won a lot of competitions here and there and stuff like that. People loved it, had standing 4.5 plus ratings and stuff like that. But games by nature are not things that just go viral unless you're lucky, especially in this saturated market. You have a lot of things that you need to do on the sales channel to make sure you're selling your game. And, you know, like while having self-published Kukulu, that's what we learned. It takes a lot of external knowledge, like about not just marketing, but a lot of very specific knowledge of the markets that you want to conquer, the channels, the actual money that you need to put into marketing the game, and the actual knowledge you need to put into your game itself to make it monetizable, to actually make people pay for it. That's a lot of things that we're missing. And this is things that you can actually get from a publisher. So the basic reason that I would say any developer would want a publisher is because they've made something, now they want to sell it. And when it comes to, you know, like the present situation that we're in, we built this other game and we've actually signed and we're working with Carry First. The first thing that I realized is that there's a lot of stuff that you have to put inside of your game to make sure that it is sellable, basically. It's not just the fact that it's a good game that makes it sell. There's a lot of other things that you have to put in. The game economy needs to be very finely tuned. There are like certain metrics that you have to meet in order to actually compete in the saturated market. So I would say that that's the most, you know, the biggest thing that's lacking in just game developers that makes us go seek publishers.
That's great. Before diving into my next question, and that will be directed at you, Dawit, we know that the publisher space is well, in Africa at the moment, you could say it's limited in terms of the number of publishers available. But apart from looking to commercialize your work, are there any other elements that you would have wanted from or expect from a publisher? The example I want to give is I work for a Western-based publisher with a number of different studios around the world, each one with certain needs, requirements, and expectations. You know, some are in it for the money because they have that luxury. They can do that and prioritize what is more important for them, while others are in it simply because they don't want to do it alone. It's a stepping stone to an ecosystem of networks and knowledge sharing. And for others, it's a chance to interact with someone who has an understanding of the creative process. So if you weren't with Carry First, or, you know, Ludique Works, or a nondescript new publisher or publishers were to come into the market and they said, hey, Dawit, we like what you're doing, we have this other elements that might appeal to you, what would that be?
Thinking of the African market for now, the biggest problem that we've had was publishing in Ethiopia. When we actually launched Kukulu, we saw a dramatic increase in retention in every other metric from the Ethiopian users than anyone else in the world. And I would say that is because we have an Ethiopian content, right? And if you have customers in Ethiopia, they're most likely to be more engaged. But the channel doesn't currently exist to actually publish games in Ethiopia. And this is true in, I think, 20 other African countries where they don't actually have Google merchant accounts. So even if you have this game, there's literally no way of selling it inside of the Play Store and the App Store. So we had to kind of like find other ways to sell it. One of them was you know, like partnering with a telco and selling in-app content with, you know, like airtime and premium SMS and stuff like that. But doing so is very difficult. We had, I mean, there are like really strict regulations to acquire a VAS license in Ethiopia, which some of them are extremely extreme. You have to have a lot of money in the bank, have to do a lot of things and stuff like that. I am not sure what that process is in other African countries, but if there is a publisher that already has that set up and they can actually just plug and play our games and start selling it in the African content, that would definitely be a huge plus. Because I'm sure outside of Africa, publishing is kind of like, you know, the basics are there. There isn't a lot of, I wouldn't know if there would be too much of a difference. But the African market, where I believe there's a lot of potential, because, you know, not many games are being monetized here, and the population which is mostly a mobile population. The payments are actually mobile payments. People prefer airtime and premium SMS, but there's almost no one that's actually using this market to monetize. I believe that this is a very ripe market that we should go into, and any publisher that has that kind of a setup in the continent, I would definitely find attractive.
Fantastic. I'd love to redirect that question to Douglas and Ludique Works. I mean, we're lucky to have, Lucy here from Carry First, and David, who have that direct relationship. But it'd be great to learn more about the structure and how your relationship at Ludique Works works with other developers on the continent. What is it that Ludique Works offers to developers that perhaps Carry First may not have at the moment?
Interesting question, Vic. So I think for us as Ludique, the beauty about what we offer is, taking on some of those challenges that developers face. So what Dawit has expressed is some of the things that we're looking to, assist on behalf of developers. We already have some of this relationship with telcos, not just in Kenya, but looking to established across the continent. So we take on the headache on behalf of the developer and basically do that one part hand holding, but also the other part is, helping them focus on what they do best, which is building games. And then we as a publisher, on the back end, basically, do the running around and meeting those, regulatory requirements that they would possibly not necessarily impossible for them to do, but takes them away from what they should be doing, which is building games. In addition to that, I think our niche or sweet spot is, we have access to a growing community across the continent, over 24 countries, both Anglophone, Francophone. So for young studios that are looking to come across the continent, most of them are looking for talent. So by virtue of having access to the community, we're able to say, hey, you really don't have to start from scratch. We do have access to the community where you could, potentially get the next talent that you can be able to work with. And then I think largely, I guess now having, we started this journey back in 2018, sorry. So, now almost 3 years in the market, at least we have a better understanding of how the market works. So, we are then able to take on these insights and pass it on to the various game developers. And then I think initially, I started up by saying we are cross-platform. So, most of the game developers on the continent have big visions, but then how do you actually actualize that vision? Today you might be building a mobile game, but 3-4 years down the line, you'd be looking to see how to build possibly a PC or console. So that's the extra value that we bring, where how can you actually launch a multi-platform kind of game? And that's something that we are able to support the ecosystem with.
Thank you very much. That's a great response. I mean, but for someone tuning in and listening right now, all this sounds so altruistic. It sounds like publishers are these wonderful, all-powerful entities with access to finance, resources, networks. I mean, you guys are like gods, essentially, to the developers. So the question is, what is it? What is the end goal for a publisher? Obviously, apart from making money, but what is your driving force there? Apart from, being a parental figure to developers, why do you do what you do, is my question. And that is aimed at, I'll move on to Lucy first, and then Douglas. Cool.
Well, I think there is a really interesting big business. So making money's got to be part of it. So we'll just own it, right? That's definitely part of it. There's a great business to be made, and there's a reason why. It's because I think that it's not just like, being a parental figure, as you mentioned. I think that there's a lot of value in publishing. It's actually a very different skill set in many cases than developing games, right? Like developing an expertise around marketing or developing expertise around how to establish relationships with telcos or payment partners is like a completely separate skill set than how do you build a great game. I think, you know, why are we in it besides the opportunity to actually create a lot of value? I mean, I think, I'll speak for Carrie first, we're very interested in catalyzing the industry on the continent. I think generally African consumers are underestimated. I've said this before. I think I've even told you this, Vic, before. But actually there's a ton of appetite, right? And to the extent that African consumers are typically not even just mobile first, but mobile only, mobile gaming provides an awesome opportunity to access and serve them. And so, you know, why haven't international studios been focused on creating content for the continent? Why hasn't game development picked up as like a sort of respected industry for college graduates to go into once they have their degree? I think it's because there are not examples of people being able to make a living developing and selling games. And so for us, what gets us like really excited about waking up and doing what we do is that actually it can be a massive driver of employment and creativity and expression that we haven't seen yet. And I think we're really excited to be part of sort of catalyzing that.
So I think to pick up on where Lucy has left, you know, the idea, I guess, for being a publisher is, you know, depending on different people, you know, there's the beauty about games is that, you know, there's a creative element behind it. You know, for someone who probably doesn't love doing the same thing, the same thing daily, I guess the creative industry and the video games gives people the luxury or the opportunity to work on different kind of content. So I think for us as a publisher, you know, being, I guess, originally African, if that makes sense, is, you know, looking at the history of Africa, there's a lot of content that, you know, back in the day when you'd meet with your grandparents around the fire, you know, they used to tell you many great stories, you know, the Shaka Zulus, you know, if you go to Ghana, etc. But also, I think in the context of Africa, many people play games. They only possibly didn't call it games, you know, it was a fun activity. And then I think maybe just looking at, you know, how the education system on the continent has been, you know, gaming or creative was the last thing that, you know, most of our parents actually wanted us to be. So I think the idea of publishing, in my view, is more like a parent, you know, just helping, you know, people get to understand, you know, like a child, you know, a studio, how do you get from point A to point B? But also just helping, if I may call it, demystify the whole idea about, you know, what video game is, and that one can actually make money. And then I think maybe just to build up on the earlier context, you know, how do you help someone understand the metrics? So I think that's a role that a publisher, you know, on top of what Lucy has said, is actually, you know, market and distribute, and that's what a publisher will be helping at the end of the day. I don't know if I really answered your question, but I hope it made sense to some extent. Yeah,
I think you touched on it wonderfully. Thank you, Douglas. My next question is aimed at Kgositsile and MTN, primarily because Douglas touched at, as well as Lucy touched on, some of the negative perceptions that come from the industry. And with MTN, you have MTN Arcade, which is this new boisterous platform. I'd first love for you to expand on what MTN Arcade is, as well as see how, maybe touch on how that platform is working towards challenging some of the perceptions of video games.
Yeah. No, thanks for that, Vic. I think every time I talk about MTN Arcade, I talk about the journey that, you know, that brought us to MTN Arcade. And that MTN Arcade is pretty much a first step into kind of, you know, bigger and better things. And And part of the journey was, having conversations with Ludique, Nathan there, having conversations with some of the guys who worked with Dawit, some of his publishers. So really, it comes off the back of the fact that if you count 3 or 4 years ago, gaming as it was done by telcos, it was really off the back of this value-added services or VAS thing where you got a couple of games that you paid for and you never really, probably never played them, didn't even know you were paying for them sometimes. And we kind of took the stance that we want to improve on that customer proposition to say, look, we want to put forward a gaming platform or a gaming service that has good enough games that people want to play. The user experience is intuitive and it makes sense. It's what makes sense to people, and charged at a pretty decent price. But as we're going through the journey, we also picked up that, look, because you operate in the African continent, there's also a big requirement of making sure that whatever it is you do, we're in 22 markets as MTN. You have to try and localize as much as possible. Localize, and as far as content is concerned, and a big part of what MTN Arcade is about, if you go to the app or the platform, is there's a section called Made in Africa, and really what it is a passion of mine as a head of gaming that I've been driving from the beginning. A passion in the sense that, kind of like Lucy talking about publishers having skills around marketing. I'm a marketing person and I understand the importance of having the right content that speaks to the right people in terms of customization, or at least in terms of context. So that section really is us partnering with a couple of game developers through our partner Gameloft, and really giving them a center stage to say, look, here's a platform that you can put your content on. We will start as small as we should, but as we grow, the intention is to really scale that from, 20 to 30 games to about 50% of the games of the platform. So MTN Arcade really is a first step by MTN to offer gaming that we think is what our customers want. And again, like I said, a lot of the challenges that we faced was pretty pertinent to this discussion. So we had to go through a process of finding who the right partners are, finding out who the studios are, finding out who the publishers are, finding out who the aggregators are. And in that journey, we got to learn quite a bit about what needs to be done. So in a nutshell, MTN Arcade is really a first step for us. And part of our view also about gaming is that we understand that Africa is mobile first, or our customers are mobile first, but in the future, this thing could be even bigger than this. So, part of our roadmap is, yes, we start with mobile, but we're open to many other formats going forward.
Wonderful. Thank you for that response. Now, I'm going to delve a little deeper into the nitty-gritty and the operational side of things when it comes to publishing. I want to focus on pricing, right? Or business models, I should say. We talk about Africa being a mobile-first market, but what does that mean in terms of the models you look to apply? As a developer, Dawit with his game, is he thinking, I want a subscription model that ties developers into, or consumers into, the ecosystem that I have, and it gives me that, emotional and mental stability to devote time to just polishing and add into a game? From Carry First, Ludique Works, and possibly MTN as well, MTN Arcade. Are you thinking premium games, fixed price, focusing more on quality? What process do you go to in determining the pricing structure and the business model that you all work around? I'd love to start with you, Kgositsile, since you just responded.
In as far as MTN is concerned, and we're looking at a couple of things. So Arcade is one, and we'll speak to that because it's the most spoken about. But the other thing that we do have is we have a messenger platform called Ayoba, which is pretty much call it similar to WhatsApp or WeChat. And, you know, so when we think about gaming, one is we think about what MTN Arcade can provide. But secondly, we think about what Ioba as a broader platform can provide as well, because it is mobile operator agnostic. So to access Ioba, you don't have to be an MTN customer. Whereas with the likes of MTN Arcade, you have to be an MTN customer. And quite importantly, that's important in that what it then says is that we are now, you know, getting even closer to understanding that in order to really make gaming, as an example, successful, we have to look beyond our own customers, you know, look beyond our own audiences. In terms of MTN Arcade, I mean, from a pricing point of view, the way that we work is we work with platform partners. You know, so platform partners are somebody who would have a gaming platform in the form of an app or a Mobi site or an HTML5 website with a whole host of games on it. We partner with those guys, and then we, you know, we agree a revenue share on it. You know, and one of the things that we found very important around enabling customers to enjoy content as telcos is this whole idea around micro billing. So what we do is micro bill, which is you know, small amounts charged on a daily basis, as opposed to a person paying you know, a lump sum up front. So those are the type of things that we take into consideration from a pricing point of view to say, what is the affordability for customers? Who's the customer? You know, our services, and I'll refer to South Africa, MTN Arcade, is 3 rands a day, as an example. So we look at, you know, how much do people spend a day on a telco, and how much of that would make sense to spend on games. So the micro billing aspect of the way we do business is quite important in how we determine the price once we've agreed who our partner is and what the games are.
Great, thank you so much for that response. Dawit, as a developer, how important is pricing to you? What do you, I mean, I would love to be a fly on the wall in that discussion you have with Carrie first, as you try to outline you know, the pricing structure. I'm sure you have a lot of say, or at least have a lot of thoughts. What's that? How does that look like when you, Lucy, and the rest of Carrie first are in a room trying to set prices?
Okay, so well, I mean, to be honest, we haven't really gotten to that point yet, but I just my thought is that I don't think it's an option for publishers or game developers to just choose. I don't think we have a lot of option. It's more of a market-driven decision. We did have, for example, with Kukulu in Ethiopia, we had an option to upgrade to a premium version of the game with a one-time purchase, and we did see a lot of traction there. But that doesn't necessarily mean that that's the thing that would work in the rest of the world. And this is not something that's new. We're not just making this up, right? There are a lot of examples out there that you can look at and see what works from the type of game that you have. And there's also the process that you have to take to make that decision. You can test this, like you can actually have, you know, different types of setups for the types of purchases that you want to have in the game. But I would say this decision it's really something that you have to test with the market and move along with. I don't believe that it's something that you decide first and just stick to. And I'm sure maybe Lucy can also, you know, say a lot about that, since they have monetized their previous game as well.
Cool, I'll jump in. So it's really interesting. We have decided to pursue, for the most part, a free-to-play model with a combination of monetizing users either through in-app purchases or through ads. And the reason we've done that is because it's actually, we think it could be a very interesting business model if you could figure out how users can pay for content through like accessing local forms of digital payments, whether that's mobile money or bank transfer. Then actually free-to-play games are a really interesting model, because really you only need 2% or 4% of your players to be payers if you're going for scale, right? And this is something that we're looking to do with across all of our games, is basically be able to cover our costs by getting 2 to 4% of our users to pay, right? And maybe you can monetize a few others through ads, some non-payers through ads. But we think that's great because you give people access to the game, right? And that can drive a lot of virality. We've seen that with Candy Crush, right? There are 1 million match 3 games on the market, and some of them are as good as Candy Crush. But one of the reasons why everyone still has it as their #1 match 3 game that they download is because there's brand recognition. And most people play Candy Crush and never spend a dime in it, right? So as we think about marketing our games, both in Africa and globally, it's really, I think, to drive awareness, to actually sort of accelerate the adoption of an awesome title. Going free to play is really appealing for a number of reasons. But it's not easy, right? So like, it's not an easy model. I think there's a lot of thought and a lot of science that goes into creating a game that will monetize through in-app purchases. And we've learned this with, Carry First Trivia, which is a game that we monetize through in-app purchases. This is something we're learning with some of the games that are in our portfolio in various stages of soft launch. It's really hard to compel that first purchase, right? And it requires a lot of design thinking and effort in order to get it there. But ultimately, we think once you've cracked that nut, that there's a lot of really awesome upside for the game and for the users.
I have so many questions on guiding a player or potential consumer into making that first purchase. But before we delve further into that, I thought we dive into some questions from some of the viewers before, just so it doesn't get lost in the threads here. One of the first questions we had, or perhaps Natalie wanted to read those. First one was aimed at Lucy.
Yeah, I can read them. If you feel comfortable, you can read them too, but I can do that for you. So the first question was from Julian Albin, and Julian actually had a talk last week, and he asked, as a developer, I'd also be expecting funding. Okay, no, that was not a question. But then, so to Lucy, as being a publisher, is being a publisher more like being an investor or a service that's provided for a fee, or is it a publisher who inputs money? So that's from Mulang Mahule.
That's a great question, and one that we get asked in different forms quite often, or it comes up in different forms quite often. So in lots of cases, publishers will provide upfront financing to complete a game or to give developers a little buffer to finish a game. And this has become increasingly sort of a popular model with some of the big publishers, right? You hear them writing insane checks as like minimum guarantees. And yeah, there's a financing aspect to it. I think we can't ignore it. But I think a publisher goes beyond that. And the reason why you'd have, typically in a lot of standard publishing agreements, there's a revenue share. And the reason why there's a revenue share is that the services that a publisher offers thereafter need to somehow be compensated for. So it's not just like an investor will say, I'm going to take a bet on you, and for the most part, they kind of sit back, right? Great for them if they don't, and if they open doors for you, but their role is to be much more passive. As a publisher, we have a role to play for the duration of the whole agreement, right? We're out there and hustling away as well.
Maybe I can add to that as someone who has been working with Carry First and Lucy. the first idea I also had was that, okay, a publisher comes in, they put like a significant load of money into your game and they market it, and then boom, you're successful. But what I found, like after working with them and what, currently working with them, is that there's a lot of value aside from the money that you can actually get from publishers, and mostly has to do with actually building the game. They're basically building the game with us, which is very good because they have people who have a lot of experience, having built great games before, such as like even a team from Angry Birds and stuff like that. That is something that has been very valuable. It means that not only are we going to be financing our project, we also have access to people we would have never been able to pay to actually give their input and to actually help us design and continue to build the game. So I would definitely say that aside from the financing, the other services, I think that's what you meant by services, but those services and actually building out the game are also very important.
Adding on to that question, and I think anyone can answer this, but I think it would be interesting to hear Dawit and Lucy continue, but anyone can obviously answer. So Matthew said, to add to the question, what about our games do you want to see? Like what do investors, I guess, want to see in games that can be invested in?
So I can't speak, well, I can speak for some investors, but as a publisher, and at our stage as a publisher, and it depends on the counterparty, right? So you have to do your homework and understand who you're speaking to. But for Carrie first, I can answer. We like to see a game that's playable. So there are publishers out there that may write a check based on a concept and a track record. So if you've been able to say like, we have this game, it did really well, it had 5 million downloads and made all sorts of money, and you go to an investor or publisher and say, we have this new concept, back us. They'll be like, okay, this team's done it before, they know what they're doing, and this concept looks really cool, and maybe they'll fund it. Right now, we look for a game that is playable, so we have to be able to like feel it, experience it, understand if it has a really attractive sort of core mechanic, right? I don't know if you haven't, you should go and download Gabeta now. But when the first time we played Gabeta, we were like, this is an entertaining game, right? And we had so many ideas on how we could get it to be sort of market ready and get it to a place where we could actually monetize the game. But the core game was awesome. So that's something that we look for. And then also a vision, that you have a sense of where you want to take this, that you've done your homework, that you understand the market, you understand how it might fit, what its competition is, and how it would be different. Because I think that's the exciting stuff that as a publisher you look for, and that like passion behind the idea.
Maybe just to jump in, I think for us at Ludique, it's maybe at the very core, the content, what's the story that you want to tell behind it. I think games like Candy Crush, they're great games to play and probably might fall in the hyper casual category. You probably are commuting to work, you're trying to keep yourself busy and you're looking for that fun thing to do. So for us, it's primarily content. And then secondly, what's your MVP? Is it playable? Have you tried to play around with the mechanics? Because at some point, it's a story, and then have you tried building it? And then what help are you looking to get it to market? So I'd say that. And then I think just to touch on something, Vic, that you touched earlier, I think many game developers are on the continent are asking themselves, I've built this game, so how do I actually monetize it? So I think what we've seen from the community is that, for the continent, if you're building a game, you can build as a free to play, where you're able to monetize from the in-app purchases, at least from the continent. And then the same game, you could actually have a premium version that, you're able to target them, international community, Europe, France, etc., who are probably on the iOS, ecosystem, have the ability to pay. So as a game developer, you're then able to generate income. So I'd say maybe developers look at a combination of, free to play, in-app purchase, premium, and also hyper casual games. And then, through the different, because the idea is that gaming is not so different from any other business. It's one core business, but how do you distribute your monetization channels? So if you get $1 here, it makes sense compared to just waiting for $3 from actually one platform. Thanks.
We will get back to questions from viewers later on. Thank you, Natalie. I thought let's get back to our regular schedule and series of brain teasing, brain absolutely shrinking questions, which I know the panelists are absolutely hating me for at this moment. That's a good thing. Before we went onto the viewer side of things, there was a wonderful comment mentioned by Dawit on gaining consumer insight, and I wanted to touch on that. It seems like data analytics, tracking, learning and appreciating, as well as responding to consumer behavior, seems to be key here. So how crucial is data and analytics in shaping your strategy? And I wanted to start with the MTN focus first, moving on to Douglas, and then Lucy.
Yeah. So I think, look, at the core of it, really, it is those insights. And I also say this because personally, in terms of how I conduct kind of the gaming space, is around those insights. I spoke to there's a lot of content that gets made, but we never get quite a good sense of how much of that is consumed. So for me, as a business lead for gaming, one of my biggest metrics is how many of the games have been played, when are they being played, what time, how much of it have been played, because I think it's quite important to understand exactly what the customers are or our subscribers are doing with that content. And then the second thing that is quite critical, which I must say we work hard at it. I don't think any of the telcos have really got it right, is around gathering insights from gamers. We're very good at gathering insights from general telco customers, but like from gamers, for us, it's a journey that we're going through. We have another product called Arcade Arena, and the idea there is that we work a lot with influencers, and we're trying to see how we can get from people that get people to play games to get them to give us feedback about the games or the platform. So insights are very critical. Actually, if you think about how the MTN brand was built outside of gaming and all of that, was really based on strong insights about the customers in the different countries. So at the core of it is what we do. We're still in a learning process of how to really clean those, but I keep very sharp matrix around how much engagement is on the platform, how much engagement is on the games, and what should be done to get more engagement. How do we get more feedback from the players of our platform?
I think for us, it's basically the same elements. What are your daily active users? How do they, how frequently do they come? And then just, from the back end learning, what time of day do they come? Is it, maybe is it, depending on the audience that you're looking to build, is it more male or more females? So, and then using that to see how to make the game better. So, at least within the gaming metrics, the numbers, numbers don't lie. So just looking at, what insights is your game able to generate, and then seeing how to adopt that, to enhance the game.
Cool. Yeah, so I think data plays a massive role in understanding your game and user behaviors. It's like everything. It's like having a magic 8 ball that like tells you the answer every time, right? So like a perfect example is if you know, one of the key metrics that we look at the beginning is retention. It's the best way to understand if your game is entertaining is, do people stick around, right? Do people come back the next day and play it again, and then come back 3 days later and play it, or come back 30 days later and play it, right? Then you have a great game, and one that has some sort of entertaining hook. So when a user picks up their phone for the 115th time of the day, that your app is, or your game is the one that they're going to. So retention is the one that we look at, but then it's really important that you actually start to understand your game with a little bit more nuance. So for example, okay, you want to see why people are leaving your game, then track them. There's amazing technology out there, right? So if you have a game with different levels, and you see that, you can see that after level 6 that everyone disappears. Well, then what happened at level 6 or level 7? Right? That's what gives you the power as a developer to understand what's going on and what your users are doing, and they'll tell you, right? That's also the benefit of mobile games. It's not like you put this out there in the world and you just hope and wish on a prayer. You can put this out there in the world and you can lose all of the 100 people that downloaded your game today. If you learn from why they left, right? If you take that data from that 100 people and you figure out what was it that they did, and where did they leave, and then you change the game for the next 100 people, and they stuck around. So like, look at that. You've made the game better. It's like one of the beauties of mobile gaming is like, it can be instantaneous, and all of a sudden you have a product that people will stick around for. And there's so many examples of this, right? Like one of my favorite games right now is a game called Match Masters. I love PvP, which is like very stereotypical. If you know anything about PvP games or match 3 games, I love match 3. And match 3 have a lot of very loyal 35-year-old women players. I'm one of them. Anyway, Match Masters is a PvP game for match 3. And they've been around. They first published their game in 2017. I think it was like April of 2017. And just now have a game that's like starting to make headlines. But they've continued to iterate. And now, King is like, what is this PvP match 3 thing that's come around, right? So it's data, and the only way you can improve your game is if you know what's happening. So my advice with a lot of sort of emerging game developers is find an analytics platform. Game analytics is free and pretty easy to implement. So I always say just go with that first and start getting eyeballs on your game.
Thank you very much. Those comments shared by everyone brings up a lot of questions, but I'm afraid by asking my next question, we will delve into a rabbit hole of which we will never return. So I'm going to pivot into something completely different. And that pivot is something that may not necessarily be representative of the state of the African games industry, but it's something I would especially love to hear from Lucy and Douglas. And that is about your strategy for letting go of the developers you work with. And what do I mean by that? What I mean is there are certain publishers that have a belief that they want to be along the ride with a developer's growth and transition and evolution over years. There are also some publishers who believe they exist to simply give them the legs, the clout, basic understanding, and the ability to strategize so they can go out and become eventually their own publishers if they need to be. It's about transferring that knowledge from one to another. Is that is that your strategy for every partner you have? Do you have a plan in place to let your developers go free?
So it's a great question. So let them go free is a strange way of putting it. They are free. So listen, I think it's partner dependent. There are game developers who want to make great games and they have no interest in building out capabilities around user acquisition. We meet them all the time, right? And they can be 10, 12, 15 years old, 20 years old, spoke to a game that had a game developer that had a game that had 100 million installs. And they always work with a publisher because they just want to build games. They don't want to think about everything else. So as far as thinking about, what happens after our sort of contracted arrangement, I think it's really team dependent, and it's hard to know up front, right? So right now, hopefully for the next 5 years, Dawit and I have an awesome relationship. We build Gabetta so that it reaches 500 million people around the planet, and it changes creates a whole new category of game that people didn't even think about. And in 5 years' time, if he's like, cool, actually, you know what, we've learned a lot from you guys, and also we are going to hire this like team of people on the marketing side in Ethiopia, like totally free to do that. But if we realize that actually we're both better off if we continue our partnership, then great. It's not a marriage. There's an exit clause built in, so we'll re-explore in 5 years.
Thank you. And Douglas?
Yeah, tough question right there. But for us, I think the beauty is right from the start. We do understand that the game developer, someone might be very passionate about a certain IP. They basically, want to do it as a one-off, or, they're looking to build it as a subsequent sequel. So for us, we take the approach of per content or per IP approach. Once we build that IP, see where it reaches. At that particular point, we then, at the particular where it reaches its peak, perhaps, we're then able to have that discussion and say, hey, are you looking to build a sequel? Do you want to exit? Or, what other IP are you looking to build? So for us, the approach is more IP focused. Work on one IP. If the team is big enough to work on multiple IP at the same time, well and good. But at least the vehicle basically runs by IP, and then get to evaluate that at the end. So yes, we realize that we won't be. Yes, we will be with some for a long time to come, but for some maybe it's just getting from point A to point B, and then say, hey, adios, we wish you well. Yeah,
great. So it seems like we're slowly getting close to the end of this session, and I want the viewers to ask questions as well. So I have two final questions to pose to each and everyone here, starting with David this time, moving on to Kgositsile, Douglas, and Lucy. And that question is essentially, you all encompass varying elements of the African gaming space: developer, publisher, and telco. However, I assume there are inspirations you have looked to far and beyond the borders over the African continent that maybe inspire your approach to business or creativity or the platforms you work on. Who are those sources of inspiration, and why?
Okay, well, that's a tough one, because I love a lot of games. I wouldn't point to one game and say that's it. But one source of inspiration, which is not a game actually, when it comes to the business side of things, is a website called Think Gaming. I really like that website because it gives you data on how much money each game is making every day. And as a business, that is one of the things that kind of inspire you to get into gaming in the first place. Because if you're not making money from the game, then chances are you would probably not continue to do it for a long time. And this is something that I strongly believe in. If you want to be a game developer, try to find all the way that you can to make money from it, to make it your living. Don't make it something that you do as a side, job or something that you do in the weekends. And one inspiration that I get is I look at Candy Crush and it's making $2 million a day. I'm like, okay, that's something that can be possible in Ethiopia and Africa as well. I look at Toon Blast; it's making $250,000-$300,000 a day, and that kind of gives me motivation as well. But aside from that, I do enjoy. I have very specific games that I love, and like for example, I don't know if you've heard of Braid. It's a very old game actually. It's a 2D game. I love that game. I play it like many times over and over again. And it kind of gives me that that like requirement that a game needs to have, that thing that you want it to be unique. You want it to be this experience that kind of like gets you out of your own world. Like it creates this amazing new mechanics and new rules on every level. And every time you are like, wow, I did not see that coming. And that kind of like inspiration kind of, like it gives me what I need to go ahead and build into the games that we have. And I'm sure like my partner Sammy, if he had been here, would say a lot more about which games fascinate him and really get him inspired to build games. But that's what I would say from my inspirations perspective.
So from my end, I'd basically look to maybe not really from a gaming aspect, but just generally maybe a life motto, if I may call it. So if you look at Angry Birds, for example, they basically, it was a long journey for a while before, they basically broke even. And why I bring that is, the idea behind gaming is, you need to have a passion for it, get to enjoy the journey. You don't know where the journey will take you, but, keep at it, become good at it. Where Africa right now is, we're at the very early stages where, talent has to grow. So I'd say enjoy the journey, become good at what you do. You never really know, when you strike the pot, because I think the journey that Angry Birds, went through, and when they did strike the pot, it was able to, cover for all the previous years that, they didn't make money. So yeah, keep at it, grow, you'll make it. Yeah.
Really good. Lucy?
Sorry, I forgot my order. Inspiration. So as a company, one of our biggest sources of inspiration is Garena, or now it's the parent company C. Garena is like, they started in 2008, and their whole mission was to give users across Southeast Asia the ability to play games, I think first on browser and then mobile. And a couple years into it, Tencent gave them license to distribute and monetize League of Legends across Southeast Asia. They didn't make a game. Garena did not make a game until they made Free Fire, which is now one of the top grossing top games globally, right? It's like competitive with PUBG. And they basically built that game to compete with some of the like big multiplayer games that are not suitable in emerging markets, because users typically have devices with less storage and connectivity is challenging. And they designed Free Fire to work in emerging markets based on everything that they had learned sort of distributing content in Southeast Asia. They were founded in 2008, 2009, and now they're a listed company in the New York Stock Exchange with like an $80 billion valuation. When we started Carry First 2 years ago, we like just learned about the C Group. And at that time it was a $12 billion market cap, right? So this is a company that's just like completely skyrocketed because they took the time to understand their users. They like took the time to understand the market that they were operating in and solve for some of the challenges there. And then their partners, they served a challenge, right? They solved for a big challenge. And that was that folks couldn't access users in Southeast Asia until Garena came in and acted as a bridge. And I think that's that's really what we're trying to do for Carry First, with Carry First and for users across the region.
From my perspective, Vic, the inspirations lie in one in gaming and the other outside of gaming. So, and the one outside of gaming is not even out of Africa inspiration. I take a lot of inspiration from what Nigeria has been able to do with Nollywood movies. Sure, man.
That's so good.
It's phenomenal. And I say this because, my previous experience was video before gaming, but just how they've, it speaks to all the things we talk about. It speaks about getting the right content for the audience. It speaks about then taking that content and make it work across different markets. And also exporting it, So I take a lot of inspiration from that in terms of just, the importance of that localization I speak about, the importance of building the ecosystem from wherever you are, the importance of developing that industry so that you've got a pipeline of content that comes. And, one of the conversations, the heated conversations, I'm not supposed to say this, but we used to have at MTN around gaming was every time I'd pitch kind of ideas, the first thing they'd say to me is that people tend to speak about the number of successful games, but nobody talks about the unsuccessful games. And what I pick up from that is that you need to make 10,000 games, as an example, to get really 100 good games. And that only comes with how you build the ecosystem. And that's what I pick up from Nollywood. It's created a whole funnel that just, they've got A grade all the way to D grade, and it just keeps going and it gets better. And, so that's a huge inspiration that just keeps me going, especially working within the continent and working in a vertical that, one of the things that is also important, I think, that maybe want to, partake in the conversation is, I don't think that the gaming industry understands where telcos come from with gaming or where gaming sits within telcos. It's not a forte. It's something that we want to get into, and to really do it right, we need to do it in such a way that we need to do it as though we're in the industry, and to be able to do that for myself at MTN, it was learning from the Nollywood, talking to the guys, just understanding how they really did it. The second source of inspiration is Line Mobile out in Japan, in terms of what they managed to do with gaming. It's like I said, you see MTN Arcade and you see a mobile platform similar to many others, but what sits behind it, or the pipeline, or where the vision is pretty much to really, as much as possible, get MTN to really participate into gaming in pretty much the same way as Line. So kind of what they did, getting their content. I think Geo is going the same line as well. So those are sources of inspiration for me, and I try to be an advocate of that with everyone I interact with at MTN. And it's we're making a lot of good progress just on a conversation around gaming and how it should be done.
And can I just add, obviously I love the Nollywood analogy, and like same thing goes for Afrobeats, right? And you know that you had like so much great talent and so much work being produced, and now you have like Beyonce coming over and doing whole albums based on Afrobeats and doing like collabs with every star. There's no reason why mobile gaming shouldn't experience the same sort of global fame. In every other creative dimension, Africa's been like a leading exporter, and the content's better than what you see in other regions. And I think gaming could be no different.
I mean, that opens up a whole can of perceptions, and the legal aspects of things, and taxation, and why, there isn't enough support governmentally. However, we seem to be running out of time, and just so we can get, some thoughts, some opinions, some feedback from those watching, and I will open the floodgates to any questions, and Natalie's here to guide us through that.
Indeed, I am. So I'm going to go all the way back up to Dr. Tegan's question, and I'm going to ask these questions, but I think this conversation has like developed, so you might have answered some of these things in small parts, but anyway, let's just get to it. She said, I think that a supporting industry is so important for games in Africa. What do the publishers feel is missing? Are there enough publishers, studios, marketing, etc.?
Not enough investment. Like, I would love to see governments actually invest in funding early stage game development just to get people off the ground, give them a shot. Because it's really hard to find financing. The investors aren't here yet. And so I think government's going to need to step in and do it until investors show up.
Which brings the question, why isn't government keen to invest? Again, it's about perception. You know. So why is that? Is there a theory as to why there is a lack of investment? And this goes across the length and breadth of the continent. This isn't isolated to, you know, one specific region.
Maybe for us, what we've seen in Kenya is, unfortunately, when it comes to government, you know, a lot of people equate gaming to gambling. So a lot of work has to go to first saying, hey, gaming is actually not gambling, and then start the process for, you know, getting to have government. So here in Kenya, I'd say 2020 has been a good year. Well, maybe for gaming studios, but also in terms of getting government support. You know, we are seeing the film industry working closely with the game industry, because, you know, the film industry understands that, you know, when you look at the West, that, you know, film also goes, so using that channel to see how to educate government, and slowly they're now getting to see, you know, we're seeing hubs looking to now support more gaming, and with time this should be witnessed across the continent.
It's arguably the first time I've heard someone say 2020 has been a good year. I don't think so that's a positive. I just had to touch on that. Carry on, Kgositsile.
I was going to say, you know, I agree with the guys, you know, Lucy and Douglas, and I mean, one of the angles that you know, South Africa as a country has been trying to work around it. I mean, it's in pockets. It's around this fourth industrial revolution phenomenon or concept. I think that's where the opportunity for the perceptions around gaming can be handled, because it feels like if you know, if the country strategy around 4IR and you know, from you know, teaching development and all of that is done right, I think it's going to add to the kind of stigma or the kind of you know, bad perceptions around what gaming is, because, you know, it'll be positioned differently. You know, it'll be around developing skills. It'll be around enhancing things like blockchain technology development and all of that. I think this fourth industrial revolution hype right now is an opportunity for, you know, industries to work towards positioning gaming better.
There is a question from Eugene that brings up the issue of visibility when it comes to games. We talk about a games industry that is partly thriving, that has issues, but, you know, the person on the street has no idea of the reality of what's going on in the games industry. How do we address that? How do we address, you know, one, in terms of trying to inspire new generation of people, have people like Dawit talk about his experience in Ethiopia, the sole game developer in Ethiopia. How do we, and I'm looking primarily at MTN here. I am looking with the infrastructure, with the platform you have. How do you tackle the issue of visibility?
Yeah, sure. It's it's a very important question, Vic, you're asking, and the narrative that I as a person in gaming and MTN espouse or try to push forward is I always, every time I have a conversation around gaming, I always show the entire value chain, and I always point to a small part that we're playing versus the entire value chain and the opportunity, you know. And the reason I do that is because when you look at it, you start seeing how the development or the developer, you know, where Dawit and the guys are, is the area of the biggest opportunity in terms of upskilling the community. Because when I highlight that, what it then means is that our guys who work in the business enterprise, our guys who work in social responsibility, then all of a sudden eyes are open to this space around content development. Let alone, you know, I don't even get to publishing, because that's, you know, once I get the eyes open to that, the conversations become different. You know, once they understand the opportunity around that, it becomes easier when, you know, the conversation, you know, if a conversation is to be had with similar about how to take gaming forward, because the guys kind of understand what it means within the value chain. So I think the responsibility, yes, is on us as MTN. I think I've learned in terms of how to position that. Look, we've got a long way to go, but there's a huge opportunity for us to continue to you know, to play a part in stimulating the ecosystem. Hence my participation in this. You know, now I know that there's, you know, a whole world of developers out there in the continent. I know that there's publishers who need help. We know that the schools probably trying to be built. We know that Simulhong is running a program. And the conversations become easier for me to go back and say, look, you always see articles that say $200 million from a game. Well, that $200 million means start here and develop that, and then you get there, you know, try to give context to the numbers. So we're working on it, Vic, we're working on it.
Excellent. I think what we all hear is each person on this panel and everyone watching is guaranteed at least $1 million to subsidize any project they're working on. That is great.
Vic, I'd like to add a bit to the visibility question.
Yes, please, David.
So basically, I wouldn't say visibility is the biggest issue. At least I can talk to, you know, about Ethiopia. I wouldn't say that's the biggest problem we have. The biggest problem is the lack of, you know, professional game developers in the country, and that is so because, I mean, anyone can just like you know, install Unity, watch a couple of tutorials, and build a game in a very small amount of time. What we need is people dedicating their careers to game development, and that's very lacking. And when we began, like, you know, 4 years ago, there was like, well, I mean, there still is no gaming registered company that's just building games, but then there was just no way of finding game developers. And it wasn't, I mean, I told it was hard, but now looking at it, it wasn't as hard to actually, you know, motivate a lot of people getting into the games industry. I myself, once I built, you know, the first game that I built, which was Kukulu, it was easy for people to look at it and get inspired. I mean, gaming is very fun. As a software engineer, if you see a game, you're definitely going to be, you know, going to want to start making it. And that's how I kind of built the first initial team that I had. I basically toured around colleges, giving speeches and stuff like that. And I was able to kind of get a lot of people who were doing it as hobbies and stuff like that, and combine them to form this gaming company. But the problem is keeping them. The problem is to actually have these people kind of stay and build themselves into the engineering that actually, you know, become great game developers, because we're competing with millions of games. There's no reason that an African would just play your game because it's an African game. It needs to be good, and you'll have a lot of competition. So you can't just be there as an African game expecting people to play your content. So the biggest problem that's lacking in keeping the gaming team is making money. And that's where publishers come in. If you have this game and you're working on it, it's beautiful, and then you have a publisher that's helping you monetize, then you have a complete pipeline of what the gaming industry needs. And once that is completely set up, then it would not be very difficult to actually bringing a lot of people who are engineers into the gaming industry as a career. And that's what's happening right now. Even like the initial financing that we've had from Carry First, we've been able to actually bring some people into our team, and they're now working full time to actually build games. That's a career that they're building, right? And like that's what's missing when it comes to visibility. Almost like every software developer in Ethiopia knows about us. They know that we exist. They've seen us either on TV, anywhere. And when it comes to the people who want to consume in Ethiopia, it's very cheap to advertise your games. Like you waste maybe 2 to 3 cents, that's USD, to acquire a user. That's ridiculously low. So if you want users, you have them, they're cheap. So when it comes to visibility, you can make everyone know about your game. The things that are lacking, the monetization from publishers and the engineers that you need to build this, I would say that is the biggest problem.
If I could just take a bit of a tangent based on what Dawit has said, for a number of game developers, they've been asking themselves, do Africans play games? And the answer is yes. We for this year we are doing what we call the Africa Esports Championship. This is a platform across 24 African countries where gamers, not people, because one part is you need to develop games, but who are you developing the games for? So we've seen a lot of uptake when it comes to the games that are being consumed on the Africa Esports platform. This year, for example, there are 4 titles, PUBG, Tekken, you name it. And the question is, why aren't there any African games on our, title for this year, for example? So it basically goes back to, what Dawit has said. It's important that the ecosystem learns that, you first need to build a quality game, not just building a game because it's from Africa, but build a game that can, compete on a global standards. And, with time, we believe that we will be able to see the next big esports game coming from the continent. So I'd say, the platform is there, the players are there. The missing link is, what's the quality of the game?
Fantastic. I do believe with that response, we are ultimately out of time, unfortunately. There are so many questions percolated. We could go on and on, but I think it's been a really lively discussion. Everyone has contributed excellently. And, it was a great way to wrap up the People of Play event. I'd love to thank the organizers, Fak'ugesi, and obviously the excellent panelists, the fantastic Natalie, and of course, Dr. Tegan Bristow for having me and every one of the panelists here. This was very enlightening, and I'm hoping there'll be more of similar conversations with each and every one here. There were links shared earlier on in the chat with everyone's website, Carry First, MTN Arcade, Qene Tech, Ludique Works, Games Industry, Africa, and for anything else you might need, keep on following Fak'ugesi Festival. Thank you, everyone, for a wonderful chat. And same time next year, maybe?
Oh, for sure. Thanks, guys. Great chatting.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Sending lots of love to the game industry. Bye.
Bye.